The Israeli military is preparing for the next stages of the war with Hamas militant group as hostilities enter the 9th day. Israeli troops are gearing up for strikes from the air, sea and land as they prepare for significant ground operations in Gaza. Hamas, which controls the densely populated Gaza Strip, carried out a massive multi-pronged attack on Israel last Saturday, triggering another war in the region. Over 1,300 people were killed in the attacks on Israel. Another 2,200 people have been killed in Israel's retaliatory attacks on Gaza. In the latest, China's top diplomat Wang Yi held a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Wang Yi noted that major powers should adhere to objectivity and impartiality while maintaining calm and restraint while dealing with issues like the Israel-Hamas war. He said that China will continue to promote peace and dialogue while adding that the U.S. should play a constructive role and push for the issue to return to track of political settlement. Wang Yi and Blinken reiterated their support for the two-state solution to Israel and Palestinian issue. The United States is sending another aircraft carrier strike group to the Eastern Mediterranean Sea near Israel. The USS Eisenhower and its affiliated warships will join another strike group already stationed in the region. The US aims to deter hostile actions against Israel or any efforts towards widening the war. Washington has also sent munitions to Israel and warned other countries not to escalate the conflict. The announcement from Pentagon came hours after US President Joe Biden called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Apart from underlining Washington's ironclad support to Tel Aviv, President Biden discussed international coordination to ensure innocent civilians have access to water, food and medical care. He also spoke with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who stressed the urgent need to allow urgent humanitarian aid corridors in Gaza. Russia has asked the United Nations Security Council to vote on a draft resolution on the ongoing conflict. The resolution calls for a humanitarian ceasefire and condemns violence against civilians and all the acts of terrorism. The one-page draft solution also calls for the release of hostages, humanitarian aid access, and the safe evacuation of civilians in need. On ground zero, Israel has massed hundreds of thousands of troops and military equipments at the border along Gaza. As the air raid sirens continue to go off every now and then in Israeli cities. Israel has also ordered Palestinians living in Gaza to move south. This as a full-blown ground invasion is imminent. On the other hand, Hamas has told people not to leave, saying that the roads out there are unsafe. The group has alleged that dozens were killed in strikes on cars and trucks carrying refugees on Friday. Israel says Hamas is preventing people from leaving in order to use them as human shields. The Gaza Strip had already plunged into darkness after the territory's sole power station went out of fuel. The latest satellite images obtained by Global Times shows the stark contrast between the current and past situations. Now we are being joined by our correspondent Siddhant Sibal from Tel Aviv. Siddhant, thank you for joining us. First, I would like to begin by asking you, can you tell us more about the situation at the moment, right now in Tel Aviv?
Well, it's just around 6 a.m. here in Tel Aviv. It's Sunday. It is a day that is expected to see a lot of developments. And will there be a ground offensive by the Israeli forces in Gaza is something that is expected and could happen today. But essentially, there is an uneasy calm in this city. It's almost around 24 hours since we have arrived. And we have seen how people have have been angry but cautious. Yesterday night, we saw sirens blaring in the city, and this has been a regular feature not only here in Tel Aviv but also across Israel. But essentially, we know that a lot of diplomatic activities have also been happening. This is a city that has witnessed a number of visits, including by the U.S. Secretary of State and the U.S. Defense Secretary. So, will diplomacy able to halt the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is something that is one of the other key focus areas.
Yes, the humanitarian crisis does remain to be at the core of this ongoing war. Also tell us, Siddhant, now that we know that the Saudi foreign minister has discussed the situation in Gaza with China's Wang Yi, and Saudi has called for an emergency meeting of the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation to discuss the situation further. Can you elaborate on that? And what could possibly be the talking points, the plan?
Well, we have seen. Well, we have seen a lot of diplomacy, whether it is the conversation that you have talked about, or whether it's the shuttle diplomacy by the Americans, the U.S. Secretary of State going to several capitals, beginning his visit of the region from Tel Aviv. But essentially, how regional countries can come up with a solution is something that is keenly awaited. Now, the OIC meeting is expected to happen, but the essential focus is that does the OIC has the diplomatic might to change Israel's stance? As of now, the only country that looks like which has that to use the phrase power is the Americans, given the regular conversations the Israelis and the Americans have been happening. And now we also know that how the West Asian countries haven't been very proactive in condemning the actions by the Hamas, even as they have reaffirmed their stance on Palestine. But essentially, amid this diplomacy which we are seeing almost on an hourly basis here in the region, the focus remains first on whether the ground offensive will be launched by Israel in next coming few hours, including today. And the second, of course, is the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, given that the Israelis have asked Gazans to leave northern Gaza, go to southern part of the Strip, and this, of course, leads to a humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. But essentially, the Israelis have been saying that their action is primarily because they're targeting the Hamas hideouts, and their priority is the release of the hostages. Several of them are still in Hamas custody.
Sure, and also I would like to ask you about the new warning video that has been released by the IDF for the Gazans to move out. What do you think is the plan? As I mean, we have already gone past the expiry of the evacuation has come, and what do you think now this whole situation is going to pan out for people at the Gaza who are planning to evacuate?
Well, yes, of course, the 24-hour deadline has lapsed long ago. In fact, there were more deadlines which were given. But as of now, the deadline which is being given is to basically send a message to Gazans that they need to leave the northern part of the Strip, even as the Israeli forces amass troops. And of course, we also know they have conducted several raids in Gaza Strip as well, where there have been more details regarding the hostages which are in Hamas custody. Now, there is a lot of anger here on the ground. We've spoken to several people. In fact, while we were coming to Israel, we saw flights full of Israelis who, of course, are willing to not only stand for their country but also support their family in Israel's darkest hour. Remember, this is the worst terror attack Israel has seen, and Prime Minister Netanyahu will be keen that there is a strong action, because that is important for his political survival as well. Because remember, just few weeks ago, almost months ago, there were large-scale protests in Israel against him over the judicial reform. So this development is something where he would like to show that he is a person who is willing to take strong action at a time when, of course, the country is reeling under this massive terror attack and there are hostages in Hamas custody.
Sure, I want to kind of, expand on the hostage situation that you just mentioned. Now, the ground incursion that looms over Gaza and could happen anytime now poses some major challenges. I mean, firstly, at the core of it is the hostage situation. How do you think the ground incursion is going to pan out in terms of when it comes to the safety of the hostages, and considering that there is already growing anger in Israel for not apparently prioritizing the hostage situation or the release of the hostages?
Well, across this city in Tel Aviv, we have seen posters, we have seen a lot of banners with the pictures of many of these hostages in Hamas custody. There have been videos also of these hostages under Hamas custody. They, of course, are using this as a bargaining chip, but essentially there is tension, there is anger. In fact, there were protests in front of a key building here in Tel Aviv by the families of the hostages, calling on the government that there is an early release. And not only these Israeli nationals, but there are several foreign hostages as well, including Americans and French. So the foreign governments were also involved. So it's a precarious situation. It's not that simple that the Israelis can just go into Gaza, because any strong action can jeopardize the lives of many of these hostages. And that is the big worry for the Israeli government and several of these foreign governments. So essentially, while Israel is keen to take a strong action in Gaza Strip, for them the big priority is the release of the hostages. And of course, for many Gazans, the worry, of course, is how far they can go in the in the southern part of Gaza Strip, and of course safety of their lives as well, even as Israel has made it clear that a strong action against Hamas is going to happen. There is almost every day there is bombing of the Gaza Strip.
Sure, Siddhant, please take care of yourself and stay safe, and thank you for giving us all those updates.